All right, welcome to another Wanduro maintenance video. We were out riding, a few days ago and got some really good mud on our bikes. Things are starting to melt up here in the spring. So we thought we'd do a little video on how to clean your bike. So I'll let Don take over from here. All right. So why would you want to clean a bike, Dan?
Well, I think for us often the trigger is that we need to fix stuff. And really a bike that looks like this, you don't want to work on it, especially not if you got to go in here. It's all going to be muddy. Can be the looks, of course. People like clean bikes, I guess. If you want to sell it, you might get more money out of it if you clean it a little. Although this bike is actually lady driven. This one actually is.
Amazing thrill.
Yeah.
I just love this stuff.
Yeah.
This is so much fun.
Another reason is we ride all winter. Once we're in the bush and on rivers and stuff, of course you have no salt whatsoever, but on the trailer, we transport the bikes on the trailer. They get a lot of salt on them and you don't want to leave them like that.
Road salt.
Yeah, road salt, just from the roads. The bike has to be protected a little against corrosion anyhow. So with this mud on, as the bike stands now, this has been like this for a week. It is super dry because we live here in Alberta where the weather is really dry. If you live in an area where it's more humid, you might want to clean it so the bike can really dry and you don't have that constant layer of mud on it. So another thing that's important is the radiators. A lot of people take these little shrouds off. However, they do keep the radiator itself clean because the mud sort of clings on here even though the air flows through. So you want to keep that clean because these bikes get pretty hot. It's good to keep your cooling capacity as good as it can be. Another good reason to clean the bike is to get at your dust seals of the front forks. Upside down forks, they tend to leak if dirt gets in them. They're not broken, mostly they're not broken, mostly the seals are fine, there's just a little speck of dirt in there. So there is actually a real seal down here and a sort of a pre-seal, a dust cover here. So what you want to do is you want to take this guy out, and we'll demonstrate that later, to clean that area out. Because if you keep this guy clean, then the real one inside will keep clean as well. To take this one out to clean it on the inside, obviously the surroundings have to be clean.
And so why would you not want to wash your bike, Dan?
Well, because it's more fun to ride the bike than to wash it. So often we just leave them as they are so that we can ride them again. But there's also a risk involved with the washing, especially if you use a pressure washer, of all your seals for your wheel bearings, your suspension bearings and all that stuff. And of course all your electronics on the bike. So if you wash the bike, you always have more water going on the bike and potentially going in things where you don't want that water. So that can be a bit of a problem, so you gotta be a bit careful with how you do that. So we tend to use a very cheap pressure washer. I think this one was 80 bucks or something like that. You can pick and choose them for under 100 bucks. It's not super powerful, it doesn't have a lot of flow, but it also helps in protecting your bike. Because if you got some big petrol powered pressure washer, you also put a lot more force on everything. We do wear safety glasses all the time when we use that thing because mud flies all over the place and you want to keep going, right? So before you get going on the actual bike, I think it makes a lot of sense to take your GPS off, take the keys out. We often have a remote for the cameras on the bike. Take all that stuff off because you don't want to hit that with the pressure washer. I put the bike on a bit of a tarp because a lot of mud falls off this bike. It can be, a few pounds of mud. So I just use that tarp to sort of collect it and throw it out after I'm done. I'll just let it dry and then I'll just shake it and put it in the waste bin. Because else your backyard gets higher over the years and you might end up living on a little mountain. Maybe you can build your own test off-road track like that. We also have a stand. It's on the other side of the bike. It's nice to put it on a stand so you can rotate the wheels. That's the main reason to do that. I often wash them as well, just standing on the side stand. It works just fine. An important thing to remember is to use this tool or any other plug kind of thing that you can get your hands on to plug up the exhaust, the muffler. So sometimes you gotta adjust them a little and cut them to size a little better. You just put them in there so you keep the water out of your exhaust out of your muffler, because it will reduce the lifetime of the packing material inside. If you don't have that, I've used just a rag before. Just put a rag in. Smart to take some color that you'll recognize as sort of as a remove before flight thing that you don't forget. I guess you'll just blow them out probably, but it's fine. So the rag will get moist, but it won't have, you know, a whole bunch of water flow in. And for the rest, I think this one is good to go.
All right, let's wash her.
Let's wash the bike.
The narrow pattern can be too powerful for the bike, so use the wider pattern instead. So now we're just going to let that soak for a few minutes, and all that mud will come off a lot easier as that water soaks through that caked on dried mud.
And I think, as you could see, the nozzle was nice and wide, not a lot of power going onto the bike, and keep a nice distance and just soak it. I mean, if there's a lot of mud on it, you want to really soak that thoroughly, so keep going, use some water at this stage. This is, I think, where you are most effective with the wash, because the least you have to scrub, the better it is, right?
All right, next stage.
So while it's, you know, sort of soaking, it's kind of nice to explain a little what to take into account when you spray the bike with the pressure washer. I think there's a lot less risk if you just use the garden hose, because there's not a lot of pressure in those, but it's very tempting to get a pressure washer out because it goes a lot quicker. We don't want to spend too much time on the washing, so that's why we use the pressure washer. So we just want to point out a few things on what you want to take into account when you do this, where the risk things are, because it's just like the side of the frame, the side of the tank or the frame, you're not going to do any damage there. You can wash that pretty thoroughly with the pressure washer. Simple things to think about is the electronics. Stay away from that. They're made for rain, to keep rainwater out. They're not made to keep, you know, 1000 psi out. It's very simple. Expensive bits and pieces. Always be more careful with bits and pieces that are expensive. Simple things as the breather hose of the tank. If this is off, this is just an open connection to the tank, so you don't want water in there. So make sure that that is all on, that all your hoses, your crank breathers, that kind of stuff is on. Again, because you don't want to have water go into the engine. So another thing that you can get, I tend to not use it a whole lot. You see here the air filter on the KTM. You see that there is some water on it because it just seeps in. So the oiled filter keeps that water out pretty good, and it drips to the, you know, drips out of the airbox by itself.
Just because of the fact that the filter has oil on it already, it just...
Yeah, it will not like that water, so it will just drip off. Again, you don't want to spray full power in here and stuff, so you want to reduce that amount of water. For some brands of bikes, like the KTM, you can get these special plates that you put in there that completely block off the part that goes to the engine. Again, I don't use it a whole lot because I think it's a hassle to put on. Maybe I will regret that one day, but it's probably a smart thing to use it. So the bearings itself, there's a lot of bearings on the bike. The main ones that you may hit are the steering bearings, which are on the top here and on the bottom there. Of course, in the wheels on both sides of the hub, you've got bearings with seals. And where the shock and the suspension link up.
And on this bike, it's just the top and the bottom of the shock, and on some bikes it's got the whole linkage system with 3 or 4 bearings in there.
Here also on the rear wheel, of course, you'll see seals. But don't underestimate, there's also seals in your brake calipers. They have an oil seal in them as well. And of course the whole engine. This is just a whole collection of seals. It's at the filler caps, it's at the valve covers, it's at the oil pump, it's at the hydraulic clutch. So this whole area is full of seals.
And the countershaft sprocket?
Yeah, the countershaft sprockets of course have a seal, your shifter has a seal, so you want to be a bit careful with that. The good thing is that most of these seals are pretty big and pretty strong, and they are in a situation where they don't have moving parts next to them. So if, for example, if you have a wheel bearing, this is what a wheel bearing looks like. So this is just the inner race, this is the outer race, and you've got the balls in the middle, and you see that there is a seal on top of that. And then every bearing also has the dust seal on the outside. So this one actually goes on the outside like that. So you can imagine that here is the spacer for the wheel. This thing will rotate and the spacer is stationary, so this rotates around the spacer. So here, if you get dirt and stuff in there, it will start to wear out the spacer. In the end, also the spacer is a wear part, just because of that very reason. Now, if you put your pressure washer straight on there, you'll blow that dirt in there. So if we have a look inside, it can all collect nicely inside here, and it starts to get at this seal. Then, if this one gets worn a little and or the water pressure really goes in, you're gonna push on these seals. Once dirt goes in a bearing, it's toast. That's why bearings fail, because they get dirt in them. We hardly ever really use them to their full capacity. It's that dirt gets through the seals and then they start to wear out very quickly. So that's what you want to avoid. So every seal on the bike, you want to avoid hitting that hard with your pressure washer. Now, I get these off of eBay, and I think they're like 10 bucks a piece. So it's up to you whether you think that changing a bearing once in a while, some people change them every year. Now, they'll probably survive a year, so you can take more risk if you do that anyhow with your pressure washer. We don't want to get stuck in the bush with play on a wheel bearing, so we tend to avoid that. But in the end, they're not that expensive. The ones up here in the steering head, they are expensive and it's a lot more work to change them. If you've done wheel bearings a few times, you can change them in half an hour. These are a bit more work because of how to get at them and all that kind of stuff, and you gotta manually grease them, and it's just a lot more work. So you want to especially stay away from these guys. Also, always be a bit careful with the seat. I mean, it has seams in it and that kind of stuff. You don't want water in there because it starts to smell bad, and with us riding in winter, it's not as comfortable if it's full of water or ice. So always steer away a bit from the seat with a lot of pressure. And just if you go over the bike with a rag with some soap on it, anyhow, it's very easy to just manually wash the seat and don't hit it at all.
All right, now we've waited, what, 15-20 minutes?
Yeah, probably.
And that water has soaked into that mud a fair bit, and we'll see a good layer will come off of that, and then there'll maybe still be some dry chunks left over.
You can see here that down spring on the swing arm instead of directly on the bearings to deflect the water away from the bearings.
Also be careful with your Kickstarter seal, because that is pretty much the same seal as you'll have in your wheel bearings. And sometimes it's simply better to just dig in a little and just poke the big chunks out of there. So as you can see, the bash plate, it's full of mud there that we don't have access to. Often we leave it in there because it's a pain to get it out. But for now we'll take the bash plate off. It's a quick thing. And there you can see how much stuff there is actually underneath there. Also, with these nuts and bolts, clean them thoroughly before you put them back in and grease them up, because you see how easy it all comes off. Because this is prime stuff to get rusted in there solid, that it will break and strip and that kind of stuff. And don't lose your mounting hardware. And now it's all mud, but if you ride around in the autumn, this is all leaves and stuff like that. You know, you could even consider it a bit of a fire risk being so close to the exhaust. Now you can actually see the engine seals very clearly. So if you bust one of these, you're not going to go riding this weekend, that's for sure. So keep a good distance and don't use the full strength of your pressure washer. So I just clean it like we've done now, just pretty simple. Get most of the mud off and off you go. If you want to do an oil change and that kind of stuff, then I really scrub the engine very good. If I'm in a hurry and I'm only, fixing up some tail lights, then you can, consider just washing that back end quickly and go riding again. If you want to sell the bike, then obviously get the toothbrush out and scrub every little detail. For now we're just gonna wash it a little with a bit of soap so it's nice and shiny. But again, you can spend easily 2 days on cleaning a dirt bike.
Once the major dirt is off the bike, we give it a coating of soap and water with a pressure washer. You could also use a soapy bucket and rag.
So I like to put just a quick layer of soap on the bike with the pressure washer because it's quick and easy. And then you get a rag out and a bucket of warm water and it's old school scrubbing. Often it feels like you're wasting time by washing the bikes, but it is actually a very important part, I think, of your bike maintenance, because it gives you time to look at every little detail on your bike. For example, stickers came off, you know, what is really broken on my taillight, do I need parts, but also things as spokes. You know, you can just have a quick look when you wash it, whether your rims are dent, whether the spokes loose. You know, if you really want to check it, you hit them with a tool to see how they sound, have a look at your chain. You know, do you feel anything weird? It's just a good thing to, if you wash your bike, use that time effectively to also sort of check your bike.
And then rinse off all the soap.
What's your theory on drying it?
Well, some people dry off their bikes with a cloth. We just tend to drip dry it here. It's a very dry climate, so by tomorrow that bike is as dry as can be. Once it's really dry, I always grease up the chain. You can use any chain loop you like, but we tend to just use WD-40. It's just to keep it from corroding. And especially in the winter, we'll spray most of the bike except the rotors and the brake system, of course, with WD-40 just to give them some more protection against the salt. As for cleaning those dust seals, I only do that when it's dry because you don't want to lock water in there or that kind of stuff. I'll do it now with the bike still wet just to show you guys, and then I'll put it all back together when it's all dry. So what you do is you get a small screwdriver and you go in between there. You see, you can just sort of wiggle this loose, and be careful not to damage it. It's just that should come out pretty easily if you do this often. And then you see it comes down, and it looks pretty clean, so that is good. So inside there is the real seal. That's the seal people worry about. If that one really is worn out or is leaking very badly and you can't clean it anymore, then it's quite a job on an upside down front fork to swap them. On a standard right side up fork it's pretty easy, but with these modern upside down forks it is a lot more work. So people use 35mm film. That works fantastic actually. I've cut up like sheets of plastic before, and you want to sort of end up with a shape like this. This is one that you can just buy online for a few bucks. They're very nice to have. I actually have spares of them because they're that good, but you can make it yourself, and this is pretty much the sort of look you want. So what you want to do is you want to squeeze this in and then get the dirt out. Again, the dirt out. So you don't want to rub it in further. So if you just push it in like that kind of thing, so if this would be the seal, you push it in like that and then you try to wiggle it like this and move around it and scoop it out. So once you've put it in, it's mostly easy if you just keep the thing in line with the fork and you see you've got this. And then you can either rotate this one or rotate the seal. I prefer to do both. And you see that there is already dirt and grime on them. So you clean them. Now if your fork seals are leaking, and we have it twice a year that we find some oil on the forks. If you lost a lot of oil, make sure that you swap your oil, have it checked so that the levels are okay. But if it's just getting a bit damp and you see some oil on it, do this and also do the same thing in there. If you poke this in there, you will have some oil dripping around this. That's actually not bad because it will bleed out dirt as well. It's going in the right direction. So you do the same thing. You move this one out of the way. I would definitely take the fork guard off to do that because you want to do this quick and easy. So the last time I did it on this bike, I actually took the wheel out and the fork guards off because then you can really access it, you can rotate everything, it's really quick. And then you go in there, a little oil will drip past it, but I like it actually because it will flush out the dirt that's on here. and do the same thing, go all the way around and scoop it out and put it back together. Then if it keeps leaking, you gotta either clean it again or you gotta replace the seals. But mostly, 9 out of 10 times, this will do it.
Here you can see the before and after. Well, that's pretty much a wrap for that video, and before I go, I just wanted to remind you, if you want to like or subscribe or find links to our blog, just go to the link below or in the description. So you can join our Facebook group. We've got an awesome group going. There's our blog with a bunch of resources. We're all about exploring the places that most people never get to see, so if that's what you're into, you'll be happy here. And hope to see you again soon. Bye now.